that's part of growing and being better and recognizing. So if you say something offensive, let's say you say something offensive. How would you say it was offensive to me? How would you like me to react to that?
Probably
immediately call you a bigot and a bad person?
Not. Absolutely not. That's awful. I don't think that's the way that we should respond to anybody.
Yeah.
I think if something is said that's like offensive and you find it offensive, like then you have to be like, hey, like that personally like offends me, and I would really appreciate it if you didn't say things like that. And if it's more like a personal thing, then you can be like, I would really appreciate if you didn't say things like that to me.
Yeah.
Or it's like, hey, like that's really insensitive to the time that we're in right now, or that's really insensitive to anything that's happening. You know, you probably shouldn't say that at all.
Right. And so you say something to offend somebody, and it's a serious thing, and you kind of correct it. And then what if it's, I don't like the color red, right? Like, so suddenly you got to change it. I'm only saying that it's a very sensitive and inconsistent way of doing things. Yeah. And that's also why I stick with the teachings of Christ, right? I mean, this guy just loves the fallback is love, right?
Yeah.
Hey, love you, man. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So you wrote a paper.
I did write a paper.
Like just one paper.
There are a lot of pages in the paper, but yeah, just one.
A paper. Okay, there we go. And what I thought was cool was prison reform. Okay, you know, I keep looking at this sheet that has nothing on it except the funny comments I was making to Jonathan and Micah. Yeah. So it's totally so I'm ruining my subject here, my thought process.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Prison reform for a high school student to write a paper on could be, that's cute.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wanting to dive down that, go down that rabbit hole and see, and maybe I'm challenging you a little bit, but also I want to learn a little bit.
Yeah.
Was this just like a 2-page paper that double spaced?
Absolutely not. It was, I think so I wrote it for a research class. So, the school that I went to, cause I'm a high school graduate, crazy, but the high school that I went to had a 2-year program. It's called the AP Capstone program. And so it's, so your junior year, you take AP seminar. And then your senior year, you take AP Research. And so AP Seminar kind of sets you up for AP Research, which is the class where you spend the entire year conducting your own plot of research and writing a paper about the plot of research that you've conducted. Yeah, and so I chose something that was incredibly hard to research because I have no authority whatsoever outside of the classroom.
Sure.
So I think before I trimmed it down into like the certain like word requirement, it was like 6,100 words, and so it was a good. I had a good amount of pages on it.
Yeah,
it was a pretty fat paper, but yeah.
So okay, I always think, I mean, I'm the biggest knucklehead there is, and what I did all through high school and college was find a way to do less work. And when they said, I don't know if I was ever assigned an amount of words, right? It was like 5-page paper.
Yeah.
So I found ways to make the periods, every period
bigger
in the deal bigger, and every comma to extend it that's unnoticeable, right? The original idea was like, make it a bigger font. Well, they figured that out really fast.
Yeah.
And then the double spacing and then all this stuff. Well, I think I won at least that year, that time period, with the periods and commas getting bigger. Anyway, I say all that to say that it sounds like 6,100 words.
Yeah.
How many pages that end up being?
I want to say like, oh gosh.
Which is almost irrelevant, right? Because it was 6,100 words. I mean,
yeah. And I had to trim it down. I had to cut out like literally 1,000 words because it was, our word count limit was like 5,000 words, like plus or minus 10%. So I had to cut it down.
That's gotta be a feat in itself, right? I mean,
Yeah, the fact that I even finished it and I had like too much was mind-boggling to me, because I definitely thought that like while I was doing it, I was like, this is not going to be enough. And then I put it all together and I was like, oh, it's too much.
I'm going to say well done.
Thank you.
Without even reading it. I wished I should have done that as prep for this.
Yeah, I could have.
I've never read more than 1,000 words at one time, so it would take me a while. Okay, let's take a step back. So you're a graduate of Grand Prairie Fine Arts Academy.
Yes, sir.
And what is Grand Prairie Fine Arts Academy?
Okay, so Grand Prairie Fine Arts Academy, it is it's a public school. Anyone can audition and anyone can get in as long as you meet like the audition requirements and whatever the directors for whatever strand you're auditioning for accept you.
Can I stop right there? In your conversation, you've said audition for and strand that you're going for.
Right.
Those are almost. I get it. I mean, I'm English literate, but I formally have not used those words. Were those your words, or are those the school's words?
No, those are the school's words.
Wow.
So we have.
You think that's by design?
Extraordinary by design.
Nice.
Yeah. So we have 7 strands, and to be accepted to the school, you have to be one accepted academically. Ringers off, please.
Bodyguard has other business he has to attend to now.
So to be accepted to the school, you have to be one accepted academically, because we're an all advanced academic campus, and you have to be accepted with whatever fine art, I guess, you're trying to find yourself in. So we have 7 strands. So we have orchestra, which was what I was in, mariachi, art, band, or jazz band, because they're not like marching, they're jazz.
Yeah.
Choir, dance, and theater.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that have to do with writing a paper? You still have English class.
Right. Yeah. So,
even though these are specific things that you're focusing on.
Right. So normally, like how you would have like electives in I guess like a traditional high school, like
my elective was office aid.
Right. I also had that elective.
Nice. Yeah.
But kind of like how if you had an elective like I don't know, you still take your normal, like it's still like a normal high school, like you still take like the normal classes, like I still had like a science every year and a math every year and like an English and all that stuff and history. But then instead of being like, oh, like I'm in choir this semester, like you're in choir like forever.
And is it? Yeah, okay. Forever. I like
forever.
And so you play many instruments?
I do. I dabble a little bit.
Was that before your Fine Arts Academy strand, or was it during? I mean, how did that come about?
So I started...
Besides being a natural genius, which I recognized.
What can I say? So I started playing viola in the 5th grade at Garner Fine Arts Academy. Wow. I know, stringing it along.
Okay.
With the fine art stuff.
Nice, stringing along. Good. I got to shout out to GPISD because you hear fine arts and this focus on fine arts. I've heard that for years, and here I am talking to Rylee that in 5th grade she started learning to play the violin.
Viola.
Yeah,
thank you.
Golly, I don't even know what I said.
You said violin, and there's a difference, and the difference matters.
Good. Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome.
And I feel better educated now. So Garner Finance, so 7 years in our in art, the new arts focus of Grand Prairie Schools.
Yeah.
And Rylee, from my limited experience with her, is a better person because of those focuses. And so it's cool seeing, when you said 5th grade, I started thinking immediately, wow, she's gone through this whole experience of this new approach. So sorry about that, whatever that was.
No, you're good.
So go ahead, sorry.
I've been in Garner, so I'm like, my house is like, not even, like we can walk. Wow. Yeah, we can walk to Garner. Like we used to walk to school in the morning.
Or what's the...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've been there.
So we used to like walk to school like in the morning, or like after school we'd like walk home. And so I grew up in Garner, and I was like there when it was like in risk of like shutting down and stuff. And then they're like, just kidding, we're not going to shut it down. We're going to turn it into a fine arts academy. And before that, I thought that I was like this really athletic kid, which looking back at that now is something to laugh about, because I have absolutely my athleticism is very, very limited. Very, very limited. Yeah. But yeah.
What did you play then? What was your supposed
my athleticism?
Yeah.
I was really into soccer. That was like my thing.
Yeah,
I did
soccer's
pretty much
awesome.
anything. My dad was really into baseball, and he tried to get me in that, but
a little softball?
it didn't really stick too well. But yeah, soccer was my thing. I played volleyball for a little bit, but that also
I
didn't
think
really stick.
A skilled musician is a good fallback. What do you think, Pops? Yeah. Very good. Good. By the way, going to A&M.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you. Get your mags.
It's interesting. So, growing up, I guess, University of Texas is the thing. Like, we're from Texas, and that's the University of Texas, and they're the Longhorns, and like
Wow.
this is what you follow. And then at my age, growing up, we had a South Grand Prairie Warrior go to UT, BJ Johnson. That was when Roy Williams, Ricky Williams, Chris Sims. I mean, this was like, and then right after that, the greatest football, Vince Young. They won the title. So, growing up, Horns. First few years out of high school was nothing but horns.
Yeah.
Well, my brother went to A&M.
Yeah.
And that was back 97, 98. And so I started following them then. And once the Horns I was less interested in their football program, and they were just kind of a subpar team.
Yeah, they're not good.
You're not as excited, whatever. And then you realize all your friends or family or somebody went to A&M. And so the athletics program, in my opinion, are pretty similar. And so I've slowly become a lot bigger fan of A&M. So I'm glad you're going there. And I feel like the post Aggie benefits are good as well.
Yeah.
They're pretty tight-knit group.
Yeah, the Aggie Network is really like one of the things that super like big time like drew me into A&M. Like besides all like the traditions and just like the intense like Aggie spirit, it was definitely the Aggie Network that kind of like sealed the deal.
What are your thoughts on the Aggie involvement? I mean, you can
I
go
love
all
it.
in.
I love it.
Yeah. Bryan Para, who just got elected to our school board, was in the Corps Cadets.
Heck yeah.
And he was on here just about a month ago, and we were talking to him about that. Yeah. He did a yell for us and everything.
Yes.
It was just howdy. It was a howdy. But it was a good, stern yell.
Oh, you gotta like get it down. I also work at a summer camp, and I'm on our night camp staff this week, so it's a much smaller staff. And like 4 or 5 of the other staff members, like besides me, are Aggies.
Okay.
And so I led the big talk, not yesterday, but the day before. So was that Tuesday?
Yeah.
Which is like a Bible study for like all the campers. So I led it. And when I introduced myself, I did like my wildcat with like my class. And all of a sudden, all the Aggies raised up and they like did their own wildcat.
Oh, really?
And I was like, yeah, it was crazy. I was like, this is it.
That's what it's all about, I think. And especially as you go on about your life, then you have these Aggie kind of tendencies, and you see other people who have the same. You almost have that immediate like, we're cool. Me and you, we're cool. Okay, so we got to know Rylee a little bit.
Yep, a little bit about me.
Teach me a little bit about the issues with prison reform. So I want you to start, and then I'm going to jump in and ask questions, I think.
Okay, so you want me to like talk through like my paper and like how I did it?
100%, please.
Okay, so I started talking about the origins of prisons in America because for a long time we like didn't have anything like, well, I guess like, and I started like colonial, like before we were even America, when we were like British territory.
What is the thing where you put your head and arms through? The stock. Did you talk on any of that?
I did not, because in America, like we literally like North America was used as a safe haven for criminals and debtors and all that stuff. So like so when the British came over, we had only like a small portion of like what is America now, obviously because of westward expansion.
Sure.
And there's another word that I can't really think of right now.
All right.
But it's all good. Thank you. Ooh. That's what I was thinking of. Manifest destiny. The idea
That's such a cool word.
It's really cool. It's basically the idea that the Americans were destined to have all of America because God told them to, which
Wow.
whether he did that or not,
Yeah.
I don't know, but we have it now. So
that's manifest destiny that I have $1 million.
I don't know if it works like that.
I don't know if it works that way.
I mean, you can try it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and so all of our buffer states, so in between like Native American territory and American territory, were filled with all of our criminals and our debtors fleeing from Europe to basically get like a fresh start.
Sure.
So we didn't have prisons in America for a long, long time. It wasn't until I want to say like the early 1800s that we even like started having the idea,
some type of,
that we were kind of like, well, people are doing things that are breaking the law, and we need something for that. So,
and this is outside of you've been arrested, we're holding you until the trial, right?
Right. This is like you've been convicted, like you obviously did the thing. Now we need to like figure out what to do about it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so prison started off actually really well as what they're supposed to do, because they hated the way that like dungeons and stuff was happening in England, and they were like, that's gross, like we don't want that.
No.
And so they were purely rehabilitative, like nothing like punitive. Like they were in there so that they could fix whatever it was that they thought was, I guess, wrong, and then go back out as a better person, which is the idea behind prisons today. But whether the idea is actually executed or not, which,
so let me say
it's not,
but
the
modern prison, I guess modern society has only been is the same age. I mean, has only been around for a couple hundred years max. I mean, before that, like you said, dungeons or Castaway or Australia, I hear, was a thing. Okay, so in the 1800s, they finally started to kind of...
Yeah, so it started, I want to say, in Pennsylvania, the Eastern Pennsylvania Penitentiary or something like that. That was started. It was started by the Quakers, so they were, and Quakers was a religious group at the time. They thought that like when they felt the presence of God, they would literally like quake. So they were called the Quakers. Quaker Oats, William Penn, Quaker. And so, so it was started by them, and it was purely like, we're going to take the criminals, teach them about God, and teach them about Jesus. The Holy Spirit will fill them, and they'll be better, and they won't commit crime anymore. And that was kind of like the idea behind it. Didn't turn out to be super successful, because prisons slowly but surely started, filling up and getting more full, and then they needed prison reform because they needed a new like wave of reform, because they were really dirty and overcrowded, and they were still filling up when they thought that they were trying to do something to fix it.
So at this point, is this now an easier option for the judges and court systems to send them to the prisons? I mean, at first it sounds like, oh yeah, okay, we'll put a few people in here and try to reform them, and then now it's like, oh, go there, you go there, you go there.
Yeah, well, it has, the way that people view prisons has a lot to do with the people that are in office. So when Jackson came in, and Andrew Jackson was just, wow, what a guy that guy was. Trail of Tears, that's the perfect example of who he was as a person and as a president.
What's the quick summaries of Trail of Tears?
Trail of Tears. So this goes into Manifest Destiny, Westward Expansion. So Andrew Jackson led a whole party, and whenever they went through Native American territory, they literally slaughtered all of them on their way.
That makes sense now.
So the people who supported Jackson, which interesting, and people are wanting to change that for very obvious reasons, but I don't really know what changing that stuff kind of does, but it is what it is.
That's a big tide to fight, but things are changing. Who knows? We'll see.
Has Harriet Tubman been put on the dollar bill yet? Have they started printing her? I know they talked about
It's amazing how many people wanted to fight that. Not that I've decided like it's a great idea or not a great idea, but it's amazing how people just wanted to immediately just say like it's the worst idea ever. It doesn't seem like the worst idea in the world, but whatever. That's not, I'm not ready to fight that fight yet.
I have no idea. In the Jacksonian area, that's when prison became more punitive, and it was used more so as a punishment more than kind of like a rehab center.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how we land on how our prisons right now are more punitive.
So in your opinion, the original prison as a rehabilitative center was that ideal? Was that successful?
I wouldn't say it was ideal, but they definitely started off like in the right direction.
Yeah, right state of mind.
In the right state of mind with the right thing about it, because they didn't want people to like they didn't want to be a place where people were like basically just like sitting there and dying.
Yeah. And in your humble opinion, when it started being more punishment, is that a negative direction to go?
I think so, because it kind of when prisons started to become more punitive than rehabilitative, I think it kind of brings us to kind of where we are now, in the fact that there are a lot of prison programs that are in there to rehabilitate people, prisoners can get their GED, or now they can go and they can get their GED, or like my friend's mom actually works for a prison reform organization called Behind the Walls, and they go in and they teach prisoners about Christ, and they go do that. And there are a couple other organizations that do like they bring in animals and they do like animal therapy with some of the prisoners and stuff like that.
So I think the guy's name is Charles Sobel. This was and that maybe the author and not anyway. This guy was in the Reagan administration. I always know it was in Nixon, when Nixon what was Watergate? Nixon. He was like the number one guy that did all the messed up stuff.
Yeah, he was crazy.
And he ends up going to jail. In jail, he becomes like the biggest guy for leading prison ministry. Yeah. Now that's all he does. Yeah. Prison ministry. You never hear his name anymore. But he just goes to prisons and preaches and preaches and preaches. Kind of interesting how that dynamic changes. Yeah. Of course, it treats different people different ways. But okay, so from mid-1800s, we start going into more of a punitive stance. Is that lead us all the way to now, or?
Yeah, the punitive idea kind of carries on, but also like throughout the 1800s and the 1900s, you also see they start to have juvenile detention centers now, as like more kids are kind of growing up and parents are kind of like, abandoning their children, or kind of, putting them at foster care, like orphanages and foster care systems kind of like start arising. You start having more problems criminally with like juveniles, and we also start having all female prisons. Yeah. So they used to kind of like house them in the same place with like women and children, but then once they kind of got too big, they had to kind of separate them.
So I've seen people, I've been to the juvenile centers and toured them, and it's just like a small jail. I mean, it's just a mini jail. But I've also talked to the judges and the caseworkers who get paid nothing and dedicate their lives to helping these kids. Yeah. And my 2 cents is that that's far more important than maybe the prison system as a whole. Yeah. And I don't know. So there's a lot of, this is pretty diverse, right? So you've got one issue is prisons as they are now. 2, reform of the individual, right? Right. Yeah. Not how do you correct someone's bad habits? How do you punish someone's bad deals? Are you, did you speak on all this, or?
So I had to, I only had a certain amount of words, so I had to kind of limit. You had to limit I had to limit. So I did. So the age range. Words. Yeah. So the age range that I focused on was 18, because that's when you're legally considered an adult. Yeah. So I did 18 to 65. So that was like the age range that I focused on, and I focused on state prisons and private prisons.
Okay. So let's go there. Yeah. State. A state prison, does that mean it's funded by the state?
It's funded federally by the federal government.
But just funded.
Now, funded and ran by the state and the federal government. Yeah.
The employees
are government employees.
Okay. So what about the prison for profit?
Okay, so that's a private prison, and this is actually really interesting.
Let me do something real fast.
Yeah.
Because there's been a buzz. I'm not gonna try real hard, but I'm gonna see if there's. See that difference?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that works.
Awesome.
That's the guitar.
Oh.
So it's been sitting there waiting for something to sound. Hope that didn't ruin the first part there. Go ahead. So prison.
Okay, so you have state prisons and then private prisons. So those are prisons that are privately owned by big companies. And so basically what happens is it takes a lot of money to run a prison, like billions of dollars money.
An individual prison?
Yeah, like even state prisons. I have a chart.
Including build out or?
Like literally just to like keep it afloat. Like, where is it? I have one. Yeah, so it's in Texas, the average cost per inmate is $22,000.
Jeez, yearly.
Yearly. Yeah. And so Texas spends over $3 billion in our state prisons.
No way.
And that's not even anything to a state like California, which spends over $8 billion.
So within that $3 billion, are some private and some public, or
those are
that's just the expense?
That's like that's like the average expense among all prisons in like Texas.
Yeah.
So a private prison is basically like the federal government sells a prison to a big company, like say like if Apple wanted to fund a prison, like I'm not saying that they do, but like if they wanted to, then they would buy the prison from the federal government, and they would, put their own money and their own expenses into it. They would hire their own employees and put them in the prison, but the federal government pays them,
reimburses them
a crap ton of money every single year to keep the prisons running based on how many inmates are in the prison.
Okay.
So that's when it kind of becomes more about how full are your prisons versus what are they doing for the good of the people.
Okay, so I think my opinion of that is it comes down to ethics, right? And to assume that Apple, again, we're using Apple as just the corporate conglomerate example. We have to assume Apple is unethical, in this situation. Were you able to dive down that path at all, as far as when it comes to assuming someone else's ethics?
No, because there's a really strong part that's graded on like bias, and when you go to determining whether something is ethical or non-ethical, it goes off of what you determine as ethical or non-ethical, and so it's your own personal bias that you're instituting into that stuff. Okay,
so where did that come? Your grading process was?
Yeah. So.
Wow, that makes me happy, because Keith Fletcher. We had a really good conversation about, he had a former teacher, journalism teacher, that basically retired because he was saying his kids couldn't be unbiased. They all right or left, they had their opinion on whatever journalism paper they were writing, or if it was about a baseball deal, they were writing with bias, and he couldn't break that. He could no longer break that habit. So you're saying that within your grading structure, you were encouraged to not have opinions and bias, right?
Yeah. And so that is, and so I had a lot of friends that had to kind of change their question or alter it in a way that so that
that's
they
encouraging.
It was all run by College Board, which is, you know what College Board is? Oh, so so College Board basically so like when you have like an AP class or like the SAT prep and all that stuff, that's all run by College Board.
And that was who graded the paper, okay, and set the guidelines.
Okay. Yeah, and so so we had to make sure that our papers remained like unbiased, and if we did any like interviews, which I had planned to do, but then Corona kind of hit, so it kind of.
So were you still finishing it up and writing it during Corona?
No, during Corona, yeah. I submitted it, I think, on like the 22nd of May or something like that. So like mainly like, so we had spent kind of the whole first semester like researching and gathering all of our data. And then second semester is like actually like writing the paper.
We talked about this in probably February, March. Okay, so that you were finishing it up or diving into the actual
starting to like actually write it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the private industries, they're getting paid, you said, per inmate, basically.
Yeah. So
that's like schools.
Yeah.
I mean, GPISD is a public entity. However, the state pays them per student.
Yeah.
Can you correlate the two in the sense that, I mean, we're getting the GPISD should get paid on their teaching, not on who shows up? Or
I think 100% that should be true. I don't like I know there are a couple times where like if I like can't go to school, my mom's like, oh well, we have to make sure that like we get them like the right
funding.
the right excuse so that they can still get their money. And like personally, I don't think money should ever, not like money, but I don't think that like funding should be handled that way. I just don't think that it's, because I think it kind of invalues a person. Like it makes them just like, oh yeah, it's like, oh well, they're not here today. That's like $15 we don't have. I mean, obviously they get paid. I don't know how much they get paid per student, but
me either. But the idea that an administrator is running around making sure students are in class because of money, not because they want to be educated, right?
Right, yeah.
Giving out attendance records because they want them in the class, not because you're a good student that shows up every day. Yeah. Which is quite interesting. So the idea with the prison deal is like, so if I'm this is no disrespect for Apple, we have to say that every time.
Yeah.
If I'm Apple running a prison system, I could also then influence lawmakers to enforce a certain law, whatever it may be. Hey, in this situation, marijuana. I mean, if you want to make the argument that Black America goes to prison more for marijuana, you're increasing the amount of Black America in prisons, which these prison guys are profiting from. That's a particular point. Did you dive into anything like that?
Yeah, I broke down. So among ages, I did like the racial, or I guess ethnical, like percentage from each age group. And Caucasian and I guess African American were always like the top ones up there, which is crazy. I mean, like, obviously America's a primarily white country, but the fact that we have such a smaller Black percentage, and that was almost as much as
much. So that's I was going to say, that's the argument is when people make, listen, we're in the middle of some of the highest racial tensions. Yeah. And we should be able to freely talk about this without worrying. Yes, don't say anything stupid, Rylee. Right. I hope I don't say anything stupid, but we're trying to have a conversation about it here. So the idea that when someone says they're X amount, 1,000 Blacks and 1,000 whites, it's equal, right? There's no bias.
Right.
They don't use
about how many whites or how many Blacks are actually in America.
Percentage wise. So, and this is used in all political arguments. Say the numbers you want to say, right? I can say there are only 1,000 Blacks in prison, or and then whatever claim note, or I can say there are 50% of Blacks are in, whatever. The numbers can make them sound the way you want them to sound, and that's the first form of education I encourage anybody to do is look at as soon as somebody throws out a statistic, find out what that statistic is based off of. Yeah. So, anyway, so the idea that Black America in this situation is jailed more kind of leads against the private prison industry. Did you make some ice of how our prison systems should be ran, or what can be done?
I did kind of I did, part of it was that we had to kind of come up with like a conclusion or like an ending. Like,
Yeah.
what have you learned from this research and how can we then grow and be better because of it?
Okay.
And so,
Do you mind sharing that? I'm real
yeah,
curious.
no, not at all. So, I think that, I don't think that private prisons are like a bad idea. I just think that necessarily like the system at which it's like how it works is a little bit faulty and it could be better. So like, I think like federally, like if the corporations that are funding the prisons are getting back funded, I don't think they should be getting funded per prisoner, but maybe, for staff or for like that money can be going towards, like prison staff or, like keeping the prison like upkept, not necessarily like, oh, like for every prisoner you get like $1,000.
Yeah.
It's maybe like for every staff member you get like
That's a good point.
$1,000
Yeah.
or something like that. And then also focusing a lot more on the education aspect of it, because it kind of stops at GED. Like that's kind of where like the education programs stop. And that's even if they're in there for long enough to get a GED.
Right, okay.
Because like some people who are in there have like literally like a middle school education, so they're expected to get 4 years
of school plus take
like,
a test.
Yeah, plus all that kind of stuff, and it just doesn't really kind of work out. So more about getting like a degree and more just about like learning actual skills that they can take out into the real world. So kind of like instead of like maybe like GED programs, like trade school programs.
Yeah. Wow, that's
so that they can leave and then have jobs.
And that's one of the biggest things is when the repeat offenders, right? So somebody who goes to jail or prison is more likely to go back.
And the longer you're in there, the stats of you going back in get higher and higher.
And some folks even probably determine that that's a better way of living if you're coming home to, especially if you're trying to get out of like a bad situation. Every time you're at home or your neighborhood or whatever. So the prison industry can be run privately, and that's not in itself
a bad thing.
A problem. And perhaps better than a publicly funded deal.
Yeah, a lot of the times, like the private prisons, because they have other entities than just, essentially tax dollars going into them. They have these huge corporations with, billions upon trillions and trillions of dollars. They have, like the buildings are nicer and the food that they're getting is a bit more, better quality and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so prison for profit sounds so bad. In a ideal capitalistic society, that's okay, I'm going to run a prison and I'm going to make more money, the better I run it. And again, this is ideally, right?
Yeah.
So I set up programs to educate. I set up programs to trade schools in my prison. And I don't know what my incentive is. The people who leave my prison
don't come back.
Yeah. And then that's how I'm judged, maybe. And I wonder if that's taken into account. And then the governance of it. I was thinking about, I'm an elected official more or less. So the city runs, they take your tax dollars, they fix your roads, provide police and fire, blah, 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 blah. In order to overlook that, as a voter, you send your representative to make sure it's all done correctly, but also to install change. So prisons could be done that way.
Yeah.
And it's not the brother of the dirty politician that's getting paid or whatever.
Yeah.
Literally, you could elect one or two officials, a couple could be appointed.
Yeah.
And you have a constant turnover. I don't know. I'm just thinking of ideas of how to...
absolutely. I think that there's a lot of stuff that can be done. And I think that they also, they could be a lot worse than they are. But I think right now, America's ideas of prison they lean more towards the punitive side than they do the rehabilitative.
Okay, so then punitive, are we wanting to avoid punishment? I mean, when you say that, it almost seems like it's a bad thing, but is punishment, I mean,
punishment isn't
consequences, punishment?
No. I think that there are consequences with like everything you do. Obviously, you know, like your kid steals like a lollipop from the candy store. You just go, "Oh, Johnny, you know we don't do that." Like, of course they're gonna do it again.
Sure.
You know, so I think that they're kind of like a happy medium. Like, you know, they're in there because what they did was wrong, and they just and they need to, you know.
So this is like modern parenting as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I got spanked as a kid, and there was a point where my dad just realized it didn't work. Like, like some kids, it took one time to get spanked, and they're never going to do anything wrong again.
Yeah, I think I got spanked maybe like once or twice.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a thing now. Like these days, it's a lot less of a.
Yeah.
People don't do it as much. Well, it started to work when I was grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is grounded prison? You see what I'm saying? Like I was sent to my room, and I could not leave my room for that day, and then I couldn't do anything with my friends for a week or something, you know, whatever.
Right.
And that's prison, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you've committed this offense. You're going to go this and stay there. So that in itself is punishment. And so I think the idea is we're casting this one punishment for every offender.
Yeah.
When we're learning very quickly how individualistic we all are, right? And so is the prison, is it their obligation to find out what type of person you are and then apply the proper punishment to you? Ooh, I mean, that's...
Yeah, I don't know if that could ever be something that like works like the way that it should, just because that seems like it gets into the whole of like, well, how do you figure out what kind of person they are? Like, how do you figure out if they're like actually learning from the punishment? If they're just
and
like,
many of them are already maniacal people, right?
Yeah.
And so they could fool you into thinking what type of person you are. Okay, so how many people are in prison system?
Oh, like
10.
10 people in the whole entire world.
You started to say 2.
I said too many to count.
Too many.
Too
like
many to count.
Millions.
Billions. Yeah.
In the system, some type of way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's worldwide probably. You say billions. There's
trillion. Like if you're
no,
talking
no,
like
no,
world,
what are
you
talking
talking
about? I'm sorry.
Billions? What is? I'm confused.
Let's take a step back here. How many people in America are in prison?
Millions. Yeah.
Okay. And so the first argument is how many different people are there?
Yeah.
All kinds, right? So if they're okay, so this is my solution to education, which sounds like I think could be a solution to prison reform. It's unattainable, but I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
Double our teachers. Double our prisons.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you get more individual. I'd say in the schools, in many situations, you need to do triple the amount of teachers. But in prisons, perhaps double. So you don't have you have, 10 prisons for one guard or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, it may not be the guards, but how about programs to rehabilitate? Like if we're really concerned about rehabilitating those that are broken, throwing them in a room with other broken people may not be the best.
Yeah.
And in schools, how many people were average in a class at Grand Prairie Fine Arts Academy?
I graduated with 90 people in my class.
Ooh, that's an interesting response, because I'm thinking about, so you're talking about your class size from that school.
Yeah, so when I graduated, I had 90 kids.
That's very small. How much did you interact with Grand Prairie High?
Not at all.
None at all. I mean, you're almost,
unless they were using our gyms, which they have their own gym.
Yeah. Get out of here, you.
They have a whole field house.
Yeah.
GPIC just built them a whole field house, and they're like, oh, but we need this gym for volleyball.
How many were in your classroom?
In my classroom?
Yeah.
It depends. Like my AP research class, there's 8 of us.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But in my government class, there's 27, 28.
27, 28. I was thinking 30 would be a average number. And if we could do one teacher per 15 kids,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, golly, I think the effectiveness
Yeah.
and the ability, one, that the kids are learning.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're learning, you're actually like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my frustration learning was like I didn't get it, but I was forced to go back and try again and try
Mm-hmm.
again, and failure. It's the most frustrating thing ever,
Yeah.
and you hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you have the teacher who has the time to actually learn it or teach it to you, you're encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of being in a 8x8
Mm-hmm.
cell,
Yeah, they're pretty small.
The alternatives would be trying to teach them things and work trade, education.
Yeah.
Is that going on in the prisons now, but just not at a...
Not so much in America, but like I used kind of like I think it was Sweden as like a better example, because I took recidivism rates per capita. So like per like every 1,000 prisoners, like in Sweden only like 15, this is like not correct, but like only like say like 15% of them like return to prison. But in America it's like 80% or 90%. And that's still per every 1,000 prisoners. So it's not like, of course, we have, America's a lot bigger than Sweden is, so we're going to have more prisoners and higher statistics, but even just like per capita, our recidivism rates are ridiculously higher than nearly anywhere else in the world.
That's got to be the biggest
tell of that we're not doing something right.
Right.
Like other people are doing it better than we are.
It's like there's going to be an amount of people who break the law. There's going to be people who, but when you're punished, it sounds like the punishment isn't a punishment.
No.
Because it's not deterring anybody from continuing down that path.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's, like you just said, the tell-all sign, how broken it is.
Yeah.
If you return, you weren't punished. Like, my dad kept spanking me, and it never worked. And finally, he changed the way he punished me, right? And whenever I got grounded, that was the worst by far. No matter, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah.
So those that returning to prison is the failure of our system.
And honestly, I think it really stems from the fact that they have nowhere to go when they leave prison. Because sometimes life in prison is
halfway
better than
what
they have outside.
And the influences, the influences. Even if you have a home, your neighbors are still the neighbors. Your neighborhood is still the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you fall back. I always say, and so this is why I work up with the youth, with you guys. I did it anyway because anyway, it's easier to build a good man than it is to repair a broken one. Yeah. So it's interesting. So as I work with the youth, I'm attempting to build good people.
And I think y'all are. I think Calvary has a great youth program.
And then as you're talking about repairing broken ones, isn't that cool? Like, I love that's kind of how this came together. Well, I just want to say that, I do that. I admit all the time, a lot of it's to fill me up. I mean, I'm a single dude, and believe it or not, I'm kind of a good guy. I promise. I'm a nice guy, and so
I'm just kidding.
And when I go and I'm not like, hey, boys and girls, like do good things,
yeah.
I'm just kind of there, and if you guys have questions or whatever I can do to help out.
And I think a lot of times that's just what people need, is just someone to listen if they need it, and just someone to just, be there if they need them.
And that's the whole idea of like friends and like camaraderie, and like, I like having counselors. I've had a few counselors on here, like of not-for-profit counseling centers. And that's the thing we always surmise is like, honestly, if you're able to communicate properly with your friends and family, it's like that really takes out a lot of that need for counseling services. And once you're damaged and the issues are so private, it's tough to share with your friends. Yeah, counselors necessary. But so, and part of that is helping to enable you in the sense that if you're doing a car wash, and Charles himself is planning it, he can't be at 2 locations, right?
Right.
A car ride, and as you are around those other kids, as a friendship, as also a leader. I mean, anyway, it's just a kind of a holistic approach to everything. And that's just one group, right? Like you have your school group, you have your social group. It's a pleasure, and it's good to, like I said, you guys fill me up more than anything else. And it's encouraging to see people grow, especially like a 6th grader to a 7th grader even. Like they come in at 6th grade and there's like weenie little kids. And then by 7th grade, they've already like almost like had their head a little bit higher. They've grown an inch or 2.
Yeah, working with kids is definitely like something else. Like I'm a camp counselor, and like even sometimes over a week, it's like crazy. Like the kids that you see on Monday that just like keep to themselves, and they're like, I don't know, like that zip line's really high, and then by Friday they're like, I want to do the zip line 30 billion times. It's crazy. And I have 9th graders this week because I'm at night camp.
Okay,
that's the same age as my little sister, and so it's weird to see that.
Well, Rylee, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no problem. It was a lot of fun.
I had to get 2 other groups that are involved at the church to do this before you finally got motivated.
Okay, hey now. We've been trying to do this for a long time.
Yeah, and I understand. It was a thing that I knew we could do eventually, and was planting the seed. And I'm glad that you made an effort to do it because, one, it's worth talking about.
Oh, 100%.
Educating others. I always say I got like 7 followers, so we might have educated 7 people. But hey,
but then those 7 people, reach 7 other people, and suddenly that's 14.
Whoa,
that's quick math.
Well, and understands that also any conversation on a somewhat mature level helps us grow as people.
Yeah.
One, what we've shared outside of the prison reform, but 2, have a better thought process already about the way prisons should be and how they could actually damage us if not done properly, and how that applies to everything else. So thanks again.
Yeah,
and,
no problem.
You're welcome anytime.
Awesome.
I'll see you a lot this summer, but
of course,
publicly I want to say I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
It should be a lot of fun. I'm sure Mom or Dad are happy to get you out of the house. Oh, they're dying.
I know. Dad maybe, Mom not so much.
Yeah, not so much.
She's leaving, so Mom's
counting her days. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
See ya. Looks good. The removal of the headphones almost is indication of
yeah.